9 months had passed since humanity's first controversial actions in the Tertius sector, and the galaxy was learning to expect the unexpected from Earth's representatives. The Concordat Council had developed a nervous habit of checking for human involvement whenever any situation arose. Usually their suspicions were correct. The discovery of the Helios Gate changed everything. A Concordat survey team had found a natural wormhole connecting two distant spiral arms of the galaxy, cutting travel time by months for anyone who controlled access to it. The strategic value was incalculable. Trade routes would shift, military positioning would transform. Whoever controlled the gate would influence the balance of power across multiple sectors. Intelligence Officer O'Minho sat in his darkened office aboard the Earth Expeditionary Headquarters, reading reports that made his carefully maintained calm expression crack slightly. His job was to see patterns that others missed, to understand threats before they materialized. Right now he was seeing something that deeply concerned him. "Admiral," he said into his communicator, "we need to talk about the Helios Gate situation, privately." Admiral Yoon Sora arrived within minutes. She was known throughout Earth's fleet as someone who made hard decisions without hesitation, a quality that had served humanity well in its brief but turbulent time among the stars. She read O's report in silence, her expression growing more severe with each page. "The Dralthek's hegemony," she said finally. "You are certain?" "As certain as intelligence work allows," O replied. "They have been quietly moving fleet assets toward the Helios Gate region. Not enough to alarm the Concordat, but enough to form a strike force. My analysis suggests they are planning to seize the gate once the Council awards it to another species. Because they cannot win through proper channels," Yoon said. "The Draltheks are aggressive, but the other species fear them too much to grant them such strategic advantage." "Exactly," O said. "So they will take it by force, present it as a fait accompli, and dare the Concordat to do something about it." Yoon studied the star charts showing the gate's position. "How long until the Council makes its decision?" 2 to 3 years, according to standard arbitration timelines. 5 major species have filed claims, including us. And in those 2 to 3 years, the Draltheks will be ready to strike the moment the decision is announced, Yoon said. "Possibly sooner if they think they can get away with it." "We have a choice to make," O said carefully. "We can wait for the Concordat process and risk the Draltheks seizing the gate through military force, or we can seize it first," Yoon finished. "Claim we are protecting galactic stability rather than pursuing territorial ambitions. The Concordat will be furious," O warned. "This would be our most blatant protocol violation yet." Yoon smiled without humor. "The Concordat is always furious with us. The question is whether they will be more angry at us for preventing a military crisis, or more grateful that someone stopped the Draltheks from controlling the most important wormhole in 2 spiral arms." The decision was made within hours. Admiral Yoon transmitted orders to her fleet, scattered across 3 systems. They would converge on the Helios Gate in a coordinated jump, arriving with enough force to establish a defensive perimeter and begin construction of a monitoring station. Engineer Pak Jun received her orders while overseeing a routine station repair. When she read what was being asked of her, she immediately called Admiral Yoon. "You want me to build a defensive station at the Helios Gate? In how long?" 3 weeks, Yoon said calmly. 3 weeks? Yoon stared at her screen in disbelief. "Admiral, a standard Concordat station takes 6 months to construct. With proper permits and procedures, it takes years. Which is why I am asking you and not the Concordat," Yoon said. "You have rapid deployment technology that we have been developing for frontier situations. This qualifies." "That technology is experimental," Yoon protested. "I designed it for emergency situations, not permanent installations." "Consider this an emergency," Yoon said. "Can you do it?" Yoon ran calculations in her head, considering materials, crew efficiency, and the limits of human engineering. "If everything goes perfectly, and I mean absolutely perfectly, then maybe. But Admiral, this is going to be the ugliest station you have ever seen. No elegance, no aesthetic appeal, just function." "I do not need elegant," Yoon said. "I need defensible." "Can you give me that?" "Yes," Yoon said finally. "I can give you that." The human fleet emerged from their coordinated jump at the Helios Gate exactly 72 hours after the initial decision. The gate itself was beautiful in its strangeness, a shimmer in space where physics bent in ways that seemed impossible. Natural wormholes were rare enough that most species had never seen one. This was humanity's first encounter with such a phenomenon, and even the military crews took a moment to appreciate the wonder of it. That moment of wonder ended quickly when sensors detected the Dralthex fleet approaching from the opposite vector. They had been closer than O'Minho's intelligence had suggested. The race was on. All ships, defensive formation, Admiral Yoon ordered. Engineering teams, begin construction immediately. Puck, you have your 3 weeks. Try to do it in 2. The Dralthex fleet commander, a scarred veteran named Thraknor, opened a communication channel. His reptilian features were twisted in rage. Human vessels, you are in violation of concordate territory claims. Withdraw immediately or face military action. Dralthex fleet, Yoon replied calmly. The Helios Gate is under protective custody pending concordate arbitration. All peaceful traffic will be permitted. Hostile intent will be met with appropriate force. You have no authority here, Thraknor growled. No species has been granted control. Exactly, Yoon said. Which is why we are ensuring no one controls it through military aggression. The concordate will make the final decision. Until then, we are protecting the gate for everyone. The Dralthex fleet held position, calculating odds. The human fleet was smaller but had positioned itself advantageously. A battle would be costly for both sides. Thraknor clearly had not expected resistance. His plan had relied on arriving unopposed. Behind the human defensive line, engineer Pak Jun worked miracles. Her teams assembled modular components at speeds that would have shocked concordate engineers. The station grew in sections, ugly but functional, bristling with sensors and defensive capabilities. It looked like it had been built by someone in a desperate hurry, which was accurate. At the Concordate Council, the emergency session had become so routine that Ambassador Kang Yunji kept a permanent office near the chamber. When news of the human fleet at Helios Gate reached the council, she was summoned immediately. This time even she seemed taken aback by the audacity of the action. You deployed a military fleet to claim disputed territory, the Galmoran leader said, his ancient voice heavy with disapproval. This goes beyond protocol violations. This approaches an act of war. With respect, Kang said, pulling up O'Minho's intelligence reports, we deployed a defensive fleet to prevent an act of war. The Dralthex hegemony has been positioning forces to seize the gate militarily. Our intelligence shows clear intent to take the gate by force regardless of the Concordate's eventual decision. The chamber erupted in shouting. The Dralthex representative denied everything, his protest perhaps a bit too vehement to be convincing. O had made sure his intelligence was thorough enough to withstand scrutiny. Even if this is true, the Sarin counselor said, the proper response was to inform the council and let us address it through diplomatic channels. How long would that take? Kang asked. How many committee meetings? How many debates? And how long before the Dralthex decided they could not wait any longer and struck anyway? You cannot simply take what you want and justify it afterward, the Vraxi representative said, though his tone was less hostile than it might have been months earlier. We are not taking it, Kang argued. Admiral Yoon has made it clear that all peaceful traffic through the gate is welcome. We are establishing a neutral monitoring presence until the Concordate makes its decision. If you award the gate to another species, we will transfer control to them. And if we award it to the Dralthex? The Galmoran leader asked pointedly. Kang met his eyes steadily. Then you would be giving it to a species that just demonstrated they were willing to seize it by military force. Is that really the precedent the Concordate wants to set? The debate continued for hours, but O'Minho's intelligence proved decisive. Once other species understood that the Dralthex had been positioning for military seizure, the entire situation reframed itself. Humans were no longer the aggressors violating protocols. They were the inconvenient truth-tellers who had prevented a crisis. The compromise that emerged surprised everyone, including Ambassador Kang. The Helios Gate would be designated as neutral territory under joint human concordate administration. Humans would maintain the monitoring station that Engineer Pak's teams were still frantically constructing, but concordate representatives would share authority over access decisions. It was unprecedented. It granted humans a level of authority no species so young had ever received, but it also ensured that the gate remained neutral and prevented the Dralthex from seizing strategic advantage through military action. 18 months had passed since humanity joined the Concordate, and the galaxy had learned to expect disruption whenever humans were involved. Mining operations without permits, rescue missions without authorization, medical interventions without committee approval, military deployments without diplomatic clearance. The list of human protocol violations had grown so long that the Concordat had created a special subcommittee just to process them. Now that subcommittee had recommended the ultimate sanction. The Concordat summit had been called to address what official documents carefully termed the human question. Everyone understood what that meant. The galaxy's leaders would decide whether humanity deserved to remain part of galactic civilization or should be expelled back to their isolated corner of space. Secretary General Lim Hagen arrived at the summit station with a delegation that included everyone who had become famous or infamous for human actions over the past year. Captain Lee Daeho, Dr. Park Minji, Dr. Han Jiwoo, Admiral Yoon Sora, Engineer Pak Jiun, and of course Ambassador Kang Yoonji. They represented the best of humanity, but also everything that made other species uncomfortable. "This is it," Kang said as they walked through the station corridors toward the Grand Chamber. "Everything we have done, everything we have built, comes down to this vote. Do you think we will be expelled?" Lee asked. "I think it could go either way," Kang admitted. "We have made enemies, but we have also made friends. The question is which group has more influence." The summit chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate representatives from every Concordat species. Thousands of beings filled the space, their conversations creating a sound like an ocean of different languages. When Secretary General Lim entered, silence gradually spread across the chamber. The Galmoran council leader spoke first, his ancient voice amplified across the vast space. "We gather today to address a challenge to the fundamental principles of the Concordat. Humanity has repeatedly violated our protocols, ignored our procedures, and acted with a level of independence that borders on contempt for our institutions. The question before us is simple. Can we continue to accept a species that refuses to accept our rules?" The prosecution began. Species after species stood to recount human violations. The Vraxi delegate described the unauthorized mining operations. A Nethian representative detailed the rescue mission that violated hazardous zone protocols. The Sorin spoke at length about the Makar Station quarantine breach. The list went on and on, each incident documented with meticulous detail. "These are not minor infractions," the Galmoran leader concluded. "These are systematic rejections of everything the Concordat stands for. Order, process, civilization itself." Ambassador Kang rose to present humanity's defense. She had prepared speeches, assembled evidence, crafted arguments that she had refined over months, but as she stood there, looking out at thousands of alien faces, she realized that logical arguments would not be enough. This was not about facts. It was about philosophy, about different ways of seeing the universe. "You are right," she said simply. "We have violated your protocols. We have ignored your procedures. We have acted without authorization repeatedly. Every charge against us is accurate." Surprised murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Galmoran leader's eyes narrowed. "Then you admit your guilt?" "I admit our actions," Kang said. "Whether they constitute guilt depends on what you value more. Your rules or the results those rules are meant to achieve." She activated the holographic display. Images appeared above the chamber. The 3 human colonies that would have collapsed while waiting for mining permits. The 23 Vraxi crew members saved by an unauthorized rescue. The 40,000 beings alive on Makar Station because humans did not wait for committee approval. The Helios Gate standing neutral instead of under Dralthek's military control. "These are the costs of following your protocols," Kang said quietly. "These are the lives that would have been lost. The crises that would have occurred. The wars that would have started. We did not break your rules out of disrespect. We broke them because waiting for permission would have meant watching preventable disasters unfold." "That is not your decision to make," the Galmoran leader said. "Civilization requires that we all follow the same rules." "Even when those rules kill people?" Kang asked. Before anyone could respond, Captain Renthal of the Vraxi stood. His presence caused immediate attention. His had been the original complaint against humanity, making his testimony particularly significant. "I stand to speak in defense of humanity," Renthal said. His wings spread wide in a gesture of formal declaration. "My people filed the first complaint against these humans. I personally demanded their removal from the Tertius sector. I was furious at their disregard for proper procedure. He paused, his compound eyes scanning the chamber. Then they saved my life. They violated quarantine protocols, risked their ship in a hazardous zone, and pulled my crew from certain death without any authorization whatsoever. I was alive to file more complaints because humans do not wait for permission to save lives. A Makar station survivor spoke next, then another, then another. The testimonies came in a flood. People whose lives had been saved by human action, communities that had been helped, crises that had been averted. Each speaker acknowledged that humans had broken rules, but each also insisted that humanity had done the right thing. Secretary General Lim finally stood to address the assembly. She was known throughout Earth's diplomatic corps as someone who chose her words carefully, who understood the weight that language carried. Everyone in the chamber fell silent to hear what she would say. "You call us lawless," Lim began, her voice carrying clearly across the vast space. "We call ourselves effective. You follow protocols designed for a stable, slow-moving galaxy, where time is abundant and crises are manageable. But that galaxy does not exist. It never did. The real galaxy is dangerous, chaotic, and full of situations that will not wait for committee approval." She walked to the center of the chamber, her small human figure dwarfed by the massive space but commanding attention nonetheless. Humanity does not break your rules out of disrespect. We break them when following them would cost lives, forfeit critical opportunities, or enable injustice. We break them when waiting for permission means watching people die. You have created a civilization built on order and process, and there is value in that. But you have also created a system where following the rules has become more important than achieving the results those rules were meant to ensure. The Galmoran leader leaned forward. "And what would you have us do? Abandon order entirely? Let every species act as they please?" "No," Lim said firmly. "I would have you recognize that order and effectiveness are not opposites. I would have you create space within your system for those willing to act when action is needed. I would have you judge results as much as procedures." She turned to face the entire assembly. "You can expel humanity from the Concordat. That is within your power. But ask yourselves this: who will act when the next crisis comes? Who will make the hard decisions when your committees are still debating? Who will save lives when your protocols say to wait?" The silence that followed was profound. The Galmoran leader conferred with other council members for what seemed like hours. Finally, he spoke. "The Concordat recognizes that humanity presents a unique challenge to our traditional systems. We also recognize that human actions, while irregular, have produced results that our standard procedures might not have achieved. Therefore, we propose a compromise." The announcement that followed shocked the entire assembly. Humanity would not be expelled. Instead, a new classification would be created: Concordat Emergency Response Species. Humans would be authorized to act in crisis situations without prior approval, but would face mandatory accountability reviews afterward. They would be given latitude to break rules when circumstances demanded it, but would be held responsible for the outcomes. It was unprecedented. It was revolutionary. It satisfied no one completely, which meant it was probably the right solution. As the summit concluded, Captain Lee stood with his crew on an observation deck, watching ships from dozens of species depart the station. Dr. Park came to stand beside him. "We changed the Concordat," she said quietly. "We actually changed them." "Not really," Lee said. "We just showed them what they always knew but tried to ignore. That sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that breaks the rules." His communicator chimed. "New orders from Earth." There was a mysterious signal coming from uncharted space far beyond the established boundaries of explored territory. Earth wanted the indomitable spirit to investigate. "Do we have authorization?" Dr. Park asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Lee checked the orders. "The message says to file the proper paperwork with the Concordat. Estimated approval time is 6 to 8 weeks. And how long until we launch?" Park asked, though she already knew the answer. Lee looked at his crew, at these humans who had proven again and again that waiting for permission was not in their nature. He thought about everything they had accomplished by refusing to accept the limitations that others took for granted. He thought about the lives saved, the crises averted, the wars prevented. 3 weeks had passed since the council incident, and the mining operation in the Tertius sector continued without interruption. Captain Lee Deho had learned to ignore the daily complaints from the Vraxi observation post. They were like background noise now, predictable and ultimately meaningless. The real work was happening below, where human ingenuity was turning raw asteroids into the lifeblood of distant colonies. It was during the third shift when everything changed. Lieutenant Kim Sunwoo was running diagnostics on his shuttle when the distress signal came through. The bridge went silent as the automated translation played across every speaker. This is Vraxi Science Vessel Eternal Curiosity. We are trapped in gravitational distortions near Stellar Remnant 774. Hull integrity failing. Requesting immediate assistance. 23 crew members aboard. Time to structural failure estimated at 90 minutes. Lee was out of his chair instantly. Get me their exact coordinates. Choi, how fast can we get there? Engineer Choi Hyun's fingers flew across his console. At maximum burn, 42 minutes. But Captain, the stellar remnant is highly unstable. The gravitational fields are unpredictable. Any rescue attempt would be extremely dangerous. Noted, Lee said. Helm set course. Maximum speed. Dr. Park Minji grabbed his arm. Captain, we need to inform the Concordat. This falls under their emergency rescue protocols. How long does that take? Lee asked. Though he already knew the answer. Park checked her tablet. Standard procedure requires filing an emergency request with the nearest Concordat station. They review the situation, authorize a rescue mission, and dispatch the appropriate team. The process usually takes 4 to 6 hours. They have 90 minutes, Lee said flatly. We are going. This will make the diplomatic situation worse, Park warned. We are already under scrutiny for the mining operations. Now we are conducting unauthorized rescue operations in hazardous zones. Lee looked at her steadily. Doctor, do you want to be the one to explain to those 23 Varaxi families why we let their loved ones die while we filed paperwork? Park said nothing. She knew he was right. She hated that he was right, but she knew it nonetheless. The indomitable spirit arrived at the stellar remnant in 40 minutes. The view screen showed a nightmarish scene. The dying star had collapsed into a dense core, its gravity warping space itself. The Vraxi vessel was caught in the distortions, spinning slowly as invisible forces pulled it apart. Hull plates were already peeling away like flower petals. They have less time than they thought, Choi reported. I estimate 30 to 40 minutes before total structural failure. Can we get a shuttle in there? Lee asked. Kim Sunwoo studied the gravitational readings. The young pilot had joined the crew fresh from Earth's academy, eager to prove himself. Now he faced a test that most pilots never encountered. The fields are constantly shifting. I would need to adjust course every few seconds. One miscalculation and we get torn apart just like them. That is not what I asked, Lee said quietly. Can you do it? Sunwoo met his captain's eyes. Yes, sir. I can do it. Then go. Take whoever you need. The shuttle bay erupted into controlled chaos. Sunwoo gathered his crew while Choi worked frantically to modify the shuttle's hull integrity systems. This is completely untested, Choi muttered as he worked. I am essentially making it up as I go. Will it work? Sunwoo asked. Probably, Choi said. Maybe 60-70% chance. Good enough, Sunwoo said, climbing into the pilot's seat. Let us go save some lives. The shuttle launched into hell. Sunwoo's hands moved constantly across the controls, making tiny adjustments as gravitational forces tried to tear them off course. His co-pilot called out readings in a steady stream. Stress on starboard hull, 20% above tolerance, compensating, gravity spike ahead, adjusting course. On the indomitable Spirit, Lee watched the shuttle's progress with clenched fists. Park stood beside him, her medical team ready to receive casualties. The Vraxi vessel was breaking apart faster now. Debris spun through the gravitational field like deadly confetti. They are not going to make it, someone whispered. They will make it, Lee said firmly. Sunwoo is the best pilot we have. Inside the shuttle, Sunwoo felt the sweat running down his back. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to escape this death trap while he still could. But he kept flying forward, kept making those impossible adjustments, kept threading the needle through chaos. Approaching the Vraxi vessel, his co-pilot announced. They are hailing us. The Vraxi captain's face appeared on screen. It was Renthal, the same officer who had filed the original complaint against the human mining operation. His compound eyes registered shock when he recognized the shuttle's markings. You are human, Renthal said, his translator struggling with his disbelief. But why? We have been at odds. We filed complaints against your species. You can file more complaints after we get you out, Sunwoo said, matching velocities with the dying ship. Prepare your crew for emergency evacuation. We have maybe 15 minutes before this whole thing comes apart. The evacuation was a masterpiece of controlled panic. The Vraxi crew members scrambled through the docking tube, their insectoid bodies moving with desperate speed. Sunwoo kept the shuttle steady through constant micro-adjustments, fighting gravity itself to hold position. 12 minutes passed. 14, 16. Last crew member aboard, the co-pilot reported. All 23 accounted for. Get us out of here. Sunwoo punched the engines and the shuttle leaped away from the Vraxi vessel. Behind them, the science ship finally succumbed to the gravitational forces, crumpling like paper in an invisible fist. Debris exploded outward, some of it slamming into the shuttle's reinforced hull. Hull integrity holding, the co-pilot said. Choi's modifications are working. We are going to make it. The shuttle limped back to the indomitable Spirit 12 minutes later. In the medical bay, Dr. Park and her team treated the Vraxi for minor injuries and shock. Captain Renthal sat on a medical bed, his wings folded tightly against his body, watching the humans work with an expression that the translator could not fully capture. Captain Lee entered the medical bay. Captain Renthal, I am glad to see you survived. You saved us, Renthal said slowly. Your pilot risked his life. Your engineer created untested modifications. Your captain came without authorization. Why? Because you needed help, Lee said simply. That is all the reason we needed. But we have been adversaries. I filed complaints. I demanded your removal from the sector. And you can continue to do that if you wish, Lee said. We saved you because it was the right thing to do, not because we expected gratitude or political advantage. Before Renthal could respond, an incoming transmission interrupted them. The Concordant Emergency Response Coordinator appeared on screen, his lizard-like features rigid with displeasure. Human vessel Indomitable Spirit. You have conducted an unauthorized rescue operation in a prohibited hazardous zone. This is a serious protocol violation. Emergency operations require proper authorization to ensure safety and coordination. Lee kept his voice level. With respect, Coordinator. If we had waited for authorization, all 23 Vraxi would be dead. They had less than 90 minutes. Your protocols take 4 to 6 hours. The protocols exist for good reasons, the coordinator said. Unauthorized operations create chaos and risk additional casualties. But there were no additional casualties, Lee said. Everyone survived. How is that a problem? The coordinator's expression hardened. You are missing the point entirely. Civilization requires order. Order requires following established procedures. What you call success, we call dangerous precedent. The transmission ended. Park sighed heavily. Ambassador Kang is going to love this. Another incident for her to explain. They should be thanking us, Choi said. We just saved 23 lives. They should, Park agreed. But they will not. They will see this as more evidence that humans are unpredictable and dangerous. Captain Renthal spoke up, his voice quiet but clear. For what it matters, I will submit a full report praising your actions. My crew is alive because you acted without permission. Perhaps that is something the Concordant needs to understand. Lee smiled. Thank you, Captain. But I suspect they already understand. They just do not like it. Later, as the Vraxi were transferred to a Concordant rescue vessel, Kim Sunwoo stood in the shuttle bay, running post-flight diagnostics. His hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Captain Lee found him there. That was exceptional flying, Lee said. I thought we were going to die about 17 times, Sunwoo admitted. But you did not let that stop you, Lee said. That is what makes you human. We feel the fear, we understand the danger, and we do it anyway when it matters. Sunwoo nodded slowly. Do you think they will ever understand that about us? Lee looked out at the stars. Some will. Some already do. The rest will learn eventually. Because we are not going to change who we are just to make them comfortable. Even if it costs us politically. Especially then, Lee said. Because the day we start choosing politics over lives is the day we stop being worth saving ourselves. 5 months had passed since the Vraxi rescue, and humanity's reputation in the galaxy had become complicated. Some species whispered admiringly about human boldness. Others muttered darkly about human recklessness. The Concordant Council remained officially disapproving, but even they could not deny that human actions had produced results that protocols never could. Dr. Han Jiwoo was reviewing medical journals in her quarters aboard the human medical vessel Mercy when the emergency broadcast pierced. Through every communication channel in the sector, a plague had broken out on Mekar Station, a massive neutral trade hub that served as a crossroads for dozens of species. 40,000 people lived and worked there, representing the full diversity of the galaxy. The symptoms described in the initial reports made Jiwoo's blood run cold: fever, respiratory failure, hemorrhaging. She had seen something similar once before, during a frontier colony outbreak that had nearly wiped out an entire settlement. That time they had been too late. This time might be different. All vessels in the vicinity of Mekar Station, the Concordant Emergency Coordinator announced, his voice tight with controlled panic. A quarantine has been declared effective immediately. No ships are to approach or dock with the station. A medical response committee is being formed to analyze the pathogen and develop treatment protocols. Jiwoo pulled up her communicator. How long will that take? Her assistant, also monitoring the broadcast, checked the data feeds. Standard procedure for unknown pathogens is 3 to 4 weeks. Committee formation, analysis, treatment development, approval process. 3 to 4 weeks? Jiwoo stared at the medical projection scrolling across her screen. The mortality rate for this pathogen is approximately 40%. At the infection rate I am seeing, that means 15 to 20,000 dead if we wait that long. She ran to the bridge. Captain Lee Daeho was already there, studying the same projections with a grim expression. The Mercy had been en route to a supply rendezvous, but Mekar Station was only 6 hours away at maximum speed. You have that look, Lee said without turning around. The one that means you want to do something the Concordat will hate. I recognize this disease, Jiwoo said. Or something very similar. We dealt with an outbreak on Gamma Colony 2 years ago. We developed a treatment. It is not perfect, but it works. How well does it work? Lee asked. On humans, it reduced mortality from 40% to about 2%. But this is a multi-species station. I would need to test and modify the treatment for different biologies. Nam Taeyang, the Mercy security chief, entered the bridge. He was built like a wall and had served in Earth's military before joining the medical service. Captain, I have been monitoring Concordat channels. They are sealing the station completely. Anyone who tries to dock will be fired upon to prevent contamination spread. They would shoot a medical vessel? Jiwoo asked, horrified. They would shoot anything that violates quarantine, Taeyang said. That is how containment works in their system. Lee pulled up a communication channel to Ambassador Kang back at the Concordat Council. Her face appeared, looking exhausted. The past months had aged her visibly. Ambassador, we have a situation, Lee began. Of course you do, Kang said wearily. Let me guess. You want to violate the Mekar Station quarantine to provide medical assistance. Dr. Han believes she can treat this plague, Lee said. But we need to get to the station. Kang rubbed her temples. Captain, the Concordat has made it absolutely clear that no unauthorized vessels are to approach. They have defense platforms ready to enforce this. If you try to dock, they will destroy you. Then stop them, Lee said simply. How exactly am I supposed to do that? The same way you have been doing everything for the past year, Lee said. Be brilliant, be passionate, and make them understand that following their rules will cost 40,000 lives. The emergency council session convened within the hour. Ambassador Kang stood once again in the center of the chamber, but this time she was not alone. Dr. Han Jiwoo appeared via hologram beside her, medical data streaming around them. This is unprecedented, the Galmoran Council leader said. We do not allow potentially contaminated vessels to approach plague zones. The risk is too great. The risk of doing nothing is greater, Jiwoo said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I have analyzed the pathogen data from Mekar Station. It matches a disease we encountered on one of our colonies. We have treatment protocols. We can save lives right now, today, not in 4 weeks. The Concordat health official, a floating jellyfish-like being named Cormeth, pulsed with agitation. You cannot simply administer untested treatments to multiple species. The biological diversity on Mekar Station is immense. What works for humans might kill others. That is why I need to get there, Jiwoo argued. To test, to modify, to adapt the treatment. But every hour we debate, more people die. If we allow you to dock and your ship becomes contaminated, you could spread the plague to other systems, Cormeth said. One ship could kill billions. Kang stepped forward. Then fire on us after we save Mekar Station. Destroy the Mercy once the work is done, if that is what your protocols require. But let Dr. Han try to save those people first. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Galmoran leader's ancient eyes fixed on Kang. You would sacrifice your own vessel and crew? If that is the price of saving 40,000 lives, then yes, Kang said quietly. That is what humans do. We pay the price that needs to be paid. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, the Soren counselor spoke. If we allow this, it sets a dangerous precedent. Then set it, Kang said. Because the alternative is standing by while people die, and that is a precedent I refuse to accept. The vote was close, but ultimately the council agreed to stand down the defense platforms. The Mercy was granted permission to dock with the understanding that it might be destroyed afterward if contamination occurred. 6 hours later, the Mercy approached Mikar Station. The massive structure was dark except for emergency lighting. Through the viewports, they could see bodies floating in some sections, areas where life support had failed or where the dying had given up hope. This is worse than the reports indicated, Taeyang said grimly. He was coordinating with his security team, preparing for what they might face inside. The docking procedure was tense. When the airlock finally opened, the smell hit them first. Death and desperation had their own odor. Dr. Han led her medical team into the station, portable equipment strapped to their backs. The next 72 hours became a blur of chaos and miracles. Jiwoo worked without sleep, testing her treatment on different species, adjusting formulas, training station medical personnel to administer the doses. Some patients responded immediately. Others required modifications that she developed on the fly, using her understanding of both the pathogen and alien biology. Nam Taeyang's security team proved invaluable. Panic had gripped the station and riots had broken out in some sections. Taeyang and his people moved through the chaos with calm efficiency, breaking up fights, distributing supplies, and maintaining order when civilization itself seemed ready to collapse. On the third day, Dr. Han finally allowed herself to review the statistics. The death toll had been climbing steadily before their arrival, reaching over 300 per hour. After the treatment distribution began, it had dropped dramatically. By the time they had been on station for 60 hours, the mortality rate had fallen to less than 20 per hour, and most of those were people who had been too far gone before treatment arrived. Final count, her assistant reported. 847 dead, 39,153 treated and recovering. Jiwoo sat down heavily, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. We saved them. We actually saved them. Back at the council, the debate raged. The Concordat health official admitted with obvious reluctance that the human intervention had been effective. The death toll was a fraction of what their models had predicted. However, Cormeth said, proper protocols were still violated. The humans acted without committee approval. They risked contamination. They saved 39,000 lives, Captain Renthal interrupted. The Vraxi captain had attended the session specifically to speak in humanity's defense. I am alive today because humans acted without permission. Now 40,000 others are alive for the same reason. At what point does the Concordat acknowledge that perhaps its protocols are insufficient? The Galmoran leader was quiet for a long moment. The question we must ask ourselves is this: are we more committed to our procedures or to the lives those procedures are meant to protect? The procedures exist to protect lives, Cormeth insisted. Do they? Kang asked softly. Or do they exist to make us feel safe while people die in organized, approved ways? The council ultimately issued an official commendation for the Mercy's actions, while simultaneously filing formal complaints about protocol violations. It was typical Concordat compromise, satisfying no one completely but allowing everyone to save face. Aboard the Mercy, as they prepared to depart Mekar Station, Dr. Han Jiwoo stood on the bridge beside Captain Lee. Through the viewport, they could see people moving through the station again. Lights were coming back on. Life was returning. The emergency session lights flashed red across the Concordat High Council chamber. Ambassador Kang Yunji stood in the center of the circular room, surrounded by representatives from 47 different species. Above her, holographic displays showed real-time footage of human mining vessels operating in the disputed Tertius sector. The insectoid Vraxi representative's wings buzzed with agitation as he pointed one of his forearms at the images. This is unacceptable, the Vraxi diplomat chittered through his translator. My people filed proper claim documentation 47 cycles ago. We have followed every protocol, submitted every form, and waited patiently for approval. These humans simply arrived and began extracting resources as if the sector belonged to them. Kang kept her expression neutral, though her stomach churned. She had received the emergency summons 3 hours ago, right in the middle of a rare good night's sleep. The message had been brief but alarming. Humans were once again causing an interstellar incident. She wondered if this job would ever get easier. The estimated approval time for your claim is 15 to 20 cycles, a crystalline Nethian counselor said, their voice like wind chimes. Standard procedure for disputed territories. The humans have been in the sector for less than 1/4 cycle. Exactly my point, the Vraxi said. They did not wait. They did not file. They simply took what they wanted. Kang straightened her shoulders. Ambassador, if I may speak. The council leader, an ancient turtle-like Galmoran, gestured with one massive flipper. The human representative may address the council. Thank you, Kang said. She activated her own holographic display, showing survey data and legal documents. Earth's exploratory vessel discovered the Tertia sector asteroids 4 months ago. Our scientists confirmed the presence of rare minerals essential for our expanding colonies. We researched the proper claim procedures and discovered that the process takes anywhere from 30 to 50 cycles from filing to approval. Yes, the Vraxi interrupted. That is the law. That is how civilization functions. Please let me finish, Kang said firmly. Our analysis also showed that during that waiting period, 17 other species would likely file competing claims. By the time any approval came through, the sector would be locked in legal disputes for decades. Meanwhile, 3 of our colonies are running critically low on the exact minerals found in those asteroids. We calculated that following the proper procedure would result in the collapse of those colonies. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages. The Galmoran leader banged his gavel-like appendage on the podium. Order, we will have order. When silence returned, a reptilian Sauran counselor leaned forward. So you admit that humans knowingly violated protocol? I admit that we chose practical action over bureaucratic delay, Kang replied. The sector was unclaimed. No species had been granted ownership. Under those circumstances, we saw no reason to wait for permission to access resources that belong to no one. It belongs to the process, the Vraxi said. To the law. To civilization itself. Kang met his compound eyes. With respect, it belongs to whoever can use it. That is also a law. The law of survival. 3,000 light-years away, Captain Lee Daeho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, watching his crew coordinate with the mining vessels below. The ship had started its life as a colony transport, but Earth had learned quickly that space required more than peaceful intentions. Now the Indomitable Spirit carried enough firepower to make any aggressor think twice. Captain, we are receiving another complaint from the Vraxi observation post, his communications officer reported. They are demanding we cease operations immediately. Lee smiled slightly. Log it with the others. Continue operations. Dr. Park Minji entered the bridge, her tablet displaying news from the Concordat Council. The session is not going well. Ambassador Kang is facing significant pressure. She knew this was coming, Lee said. We all did. Did we have to be quite so bold about it? Park asked. We could have filed the paperwork at least. Made it look like we were following procedure. And waste 4 months filling out forms while our colony slowly starved. Lee shook his head. No. This is exactly what they need to understand about humanity. We do not wait for the galaxy to give us permission to survive. Engineer Choi Hyun called from his station. Captain, the 4th mining platform is operational. We are now extracting at maximum efficiency. At this rate, we will have enough minerals to supply all 3 colonies within 6 weeks. Excellent work, Lee said. What is the status of our defensive perimeter? Solid, Choi replied. If anyone tries to push us out, they will have a fight on their hands. Park frowned. You really think it will come to that? I think the Vraxi are angry, but they are not stupid, Lee said. They know that attacking us would create a larger incident than complaining to the council. They will bluster and file protests, but in the end, they will accept reality. Back at the council, reality was becoming increasingly uncomfortable for Ambassador Kang. The Galmoran leader spoke with the weight of centuries. The Concordat was formed to prevent exactly this kind of behavior. For millennia, we have maintained peace through order, through procedure, through respect for law. If every species simply took what they wanted, we would return to the chaos of the old wars. I understand your concern, Kang said carefully. But I ask you to consider this. How many species have colonies on the brink of collapse right now, waiting for the Concordat to approve resource claims? How many populations are suffering because the right forms have not been processed? Humanity has been part of this alliance for 23 years. In that time, we have watched good people die while waiting for permission to save them. You exaggerate, the Soren counselor said. Do I? Kang pulled up more data. The Kellian famine 3 years ago, 17 million dead while the agricultural expansion permits sat in review. The Therian plague, 4 billion infected before emergency medical protocols were approved. The Proxima Station disaster, 12,000 lives lost because rescue operations needed authorization. The chamber fell silent. These were tragedies that the Concordat preferred not to discuss. They were the price of civilization, the cost of order. Most species had learned to accept them, but humans never learned to accept preventable deaths. We are not monsters, Kang continued, her voice softer now. We do not wish to disrespect your laws or your traditions, but we will not stand by and watch people suffer when we have the ability to help. That is not in our nature. It never has been. The Vraxi diplomat's wings stopped buzzing. When he spoke, his tone had changed. What you describe is chaos. What you propose is the end of order. No, Kang said. What I propose is balance. Let your laws guide us in times of peace. But when action is needed, when lives hang in the balance, let those who can act be free to do so. The Galmoran leader was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. This council will take your words under advisement. However, the humans must understand that there will be consequences for these actions. We cannot simply ignore such blatant protocol violations. We understand, Kang said, and we accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. But we will not apologize for saving our people. As the session ended, Kang walked through the station corridors back to her quarters. Her communicator chimed. It was Captain Lee. How bad was it? He asked. About as bad as we expected, Kang replied. They are angry. They are confused. But I think some of them are also starting to understand. Good, Lee said, because we are not going to stop. The galaxy needs to learn that humans do not ask permission to exist. We make moves and we deal with the consequences after. Kang smiled tiredly. That is exactly what worries them. Then they should be worried, Lee said. Because we are just getting started.